developed a little bit more slowly.
I mean, to an extent, I think you are somewhat also confusing knowledge and technology, in that knowledge can be applied in any which way you want, but it gives you latitude to do more stuff. The more knowledge you have, the more ability you have to control things, right? Technology, you can implement it in ways that you might see as positive or negative to society. So in other words, science is the enabler, and seeing as most people are interested in enabling things that make their lives better, I think that's why science always comes out on top.
Okay, yeah, fair point, I have to say. But I do return to the original thing, that one of the reasons we have to remain tolerant is otherwise you get people who, you get back to Mill's thing, you start excluding people who should be in the debate, and I think that is worrisome. And that's not just a scientific debate, although that's part of it. If I can move on to a second objection to you wanting to be, refusing to accept calls for toleration from Muslims who pray to the Kaaba, even though you accept that they don't have any responsibility for the state of Mecca.
Not any responsibility. They belong to the same religion that runs the country. I mean, this. I don't think. I mean, we've sort of disagreed on this earlier, but I don't think. If I'm part of a government that actually says, yeah, let's go and rape and pillage another country, do it by democratic vote, I think you are in part responsible for those decisions. There is.
Saudi Arabia is not a democracy.
No, I was talking about sort of the Iraq War, for instance. I wouldn't say that neither I nor anyone else is divorced from the responsibility of that. Yeah, I oppose such things, but that doesn't absolve me from the responsibility that I was actually part of the civilization that elected this government that actually went to war. I don't think that you can.
Okay, I mean, I don't see. I happen to be involved in opposing the war in Iraq as well. I mean, okay, once it started, I actually supported it for various reasons.
Just on a sort of relaxed point, do you think that that the world is a better place or a worse place for the Iraq War? I mean, obviously we both agree that the Iraq War was poorly conceived, poorly executed. But, right, if you like, having had it, is the world actually in a better place now than it would have been without it?
I think it's in a worse place.
Okay.
Very, very briefly, I didn't want to go into Iraq because we were already committed in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is near Pakistan, and if Pakistan goes south, we're in a world of shit. So even though Iraq is in a better place, the Afghanistan is worse. We should have been spending more time on that. Anyway, on the toleration point, if somebody is intolerant to you, that doesn't give you the right to be intolerant back. I mean, interesting is I'm not actually Jewish, but I quite often get anti-Semitic abuse on my channel. Apparently I look Jewish. Go figure. I don't think that would justify me going and leaving racist abuse on their channel. The fact that somebody has been intolerant to me doesn't justify me being intolerant to them.
I mean, I think we've covered this. That I don't find that a convincing argument, in that if someone is going to, without caveat, pray to Mecca, I mean, if they distance themselves from it, then then I'm cool with that, right? If they don't distance themselves from it, this is like saying, well, I didn't say anything about the Iraq War, and therefore I don't have any responsibility. I would see that as wrong. If you like, there are gradations on this. I was actually part of the civilization at the time, and I opposed it. That's a less guilty position than I belonged to this society and I said nothing, and I belonged to this society and I approved it. Right? I would see there's a gradation of guilt there. All right, albeit fairly minor. But if someone said, no, I really oppose all this stuff in Mecca, then obviously I'm going to be much more forgiving in them sort of saying, but I don't like intolerance for other reasons. In other words, if they say that they're opposed to the oppression and that Mecca is an icon of discrimination that they really don't want anything to do with, then that I don't have too much trouble with.
Okay, well, we're back to the fundamental thing that is the icon of discrimination thing. That you're, I don't know.
It is de facto.
It's a difficult one to resolve, I think. That it's the distinction between the Kaaba itself and the cities of Mecca and Medina. I find it very hard to see how they can have any responsibility there. But I think that may be something we're going to have to agree to disagree on.
But would you agree with my assessment about, say, the Iraq War, that if you were part of a nation that went to war and killed a load of people, and you said nothing about it at the time, that you are more responsible than someone who actually opposed it at the time, and less so than someone who actually advocated it?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think that if you obviously if you supported it and were vocal in that, you have responsibility. If you were saying, not only saying, I don't want anything to do with it, but I oppose it, and you're arguing against it publicly, then I think that changes things. Do people who didn't do anything, were the people who are apathetic, what is the nature of responsibility that they have?
All it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Now, it's something I would actually usually hate to say, because it's basically saying that sometimes action is the right thing to do and sometimes nothing is the right thing to do. But, for the present context, I think it's fitting.
Well, it's one of the nice things about modernity is that we don't have to get involved in every debate, every argument that's going. It's an interesting debate, that one. Can I read you a quote from Jim Al-Khalili?
Sure.
This is from the article that you linked to. One problem is that too many Muslims see modern science as a secular, even atheist Western construct. It's from Jim Al-Khalili's paper. Can I ask if you think you're helping or hindering that perception?
Hang on, read me the quote again.
One problem is that too many Muslims see modern science as a secular, even atheist Western construct.
That's true, isn't it? They were the ones who constructed it. I mean, it was primarily, especially modern science, the last 300 years since the Renaissance, that is a Western construct. Now, it is a sort of, it's a concept, it's a mechanism, but it was constructed in the West.
Okay, the point he's getting at there is that because it's seen as being Western, yes, a lot of it came out of the West in modernity. I mean, back in the day, it came from all over the shop. But because it's seen as being so Western, it's seen as being non-Muslim or even anti-Muslim. You get where I'm going with that?
But it is kind of antithetical to, if you've got deeply held religious beliefs that your book is infallible, and there's bits about Muhammad or Allah cutting the moon in half in there, you're going to run into incompatibility issues.
Do you think that Muslims tend to have literal interpretations of the Quran with greater frequency than Christians and the Bible?
I would say so, yeah. In that it is part of, this goes back to the, praying 5 times a day, reading the Quran every day.
How do you decrease that frequency?
Well, this is the problem, is once you actually get these very homogeneous populations where it is 90% Islam, it's very difficult to actually penetrate ideas into those sorts of cultures. Now, if you like, here the internet is the ace in the hole, right? If they want to modernize, they will have to plug into the internet, right?
Let me quote
you
again
make
from the same
sure.
paper by Al-Khalili, if I may. Quote, far more telling than the argument that it is religious conservatism that impedes scientific progress in the Muslim world are the antiquated administrative and bureaucratic systems many OIC countries inherited long ago from their colonial masters that are still not being replaced. This is compounded by a lack of political will to reform, tackle corruption, to overhaul failing educational systems, institutions, and attitudes.
And yet Turkey did it.
Thankfully, things are changing fast. End quote.
Okay. In some places, yeah. Iran's sort of been getting there. Iraq was getting there for a long time. Iraq was, ironically, before the war, one of the more secular countries. All right, they had a crazy dictator, but they had whatever. It was equal rights for women, education for whoever. I mean, to an extent, they needed this. If you're going to have a sort of semi-technical weapons capability, like if you're trying to actually make nukes and such like, you need a significant number of educated people.
Yeah. This is why I wanted to be able to do fancy things with a camera earlier on, so I could show this to everybody. However, I will post, if you give me a moment, a link to the relevant article. Okay, this is the article to which I'm linking, which I'm referring to. It's this is the increase in scientific production in developing countries, and what you see is that the Near and Middle East are actually increasing rather quickly, admittedly from a low base, particularly if you compare it to Asia.
Yes. I mean, it's one of those things, if you're starting from zero, every increase is a huge fractional increase. But
yeah, but they're doing better than, even despite that, they're doing better than the ASEAN countries, doing better than Latin America, doing, the point I'm making is that despite the problems they have, things are changing there. And that there are movements there in those countries that we can connect with and that we can support. So, to, as I say, kick the stool out from the extremists and support the moderates who don't have the anti-science point of view and who aren't taking this literalism on board, or if they are, aren't letting it get in the way of good science.
So, I mean, just sort of, in terms of trying to penetrate ideas into the Middle East, Draw Muhammad Day, good or a bad thing?
Bad.
Why?
Well, I mean, because I don't. We are trying to get Western ideas out there to, and by Western I mean ideas about science and how you organise society and so on. What you did with Draw Muhammad Day, again, that's a general review, is make a needless division between moderate Muslims and people in the West who want to be friendly towards them.
If you actually take a look at the history, the trajectory that was on, the moderate approach has been tried for years, and you'll recall the last time that something like this happened, the way that it typically kicks off is, someone writes a book like the Satanic Verses, the death threats come in, they go into hiding. The last time someone drew a dozen pictures of Muhammad, there were riots around the world and they burnt down embassies.
Yeah.
You need to actually get the idea into the Middle East, well, not just the Middle East, into these countries that we do not have to respect we are not subject to Sharia law. We are not subject to the rules that they think are important about their religion. And I don't think that you're getting the penetration with the "can't we all be friends with this"?
Well, this is the thing. Part of the problem is the way you, and this is a personal you, did it, is that the cognitive dissonance you engendered there was enormous. In that it wasn't just saying, I mean, shortly before you did your Mohammed Day, there was, have you seen this man that got that funk organised, not nearly as big, which I took part in. I put up some pictures and drawings of Mohammed that had been drawn by Muslims, either from outside the Sunni tradition or before the prohibition on idolatry in Sunni Islam, or when the prohibition wasn't as strong. To make the point, what happened with Draw Mohammed Day was it went far beyond just making the point into being so offensive in its mode of expression that that's all people see, and people can't see the broader point. And it wasn't, I'm afraid, part of it was what you intended it to be. Part of it was rather cruder than that, and I think you probably know what I mean, in that a lot of the people who jumped on the bandwagon were people who are racist towards Muslims. And that when your movement includes people like that, you have a problem. Because it becomes very hard. Okay, someone in the chat, NC360, racist to a religion. I can't see the whole thing. Okay, discriminatory against a religion. When you have that prejudice there in a significant amount of the movement, people don't necessarily look to you or the other leaders of the movement. They look at what they happen to see on Facebook or on YouTube, and it's people giving it, fucking Prophet Muhammad this, fucking Prophet Muhammad the other, and coming out with some fairly crude racial epithets. And that makes it, that means your message isn't getting across because your mode of expression is so extreme. I'd also say that, yes, it's true that you have to have sometimes these moments that crystallize the situation. I'm thinking here in something like Northern Ireland.
No, I think the words that are important here is big tent. I mean, what makes these things successful and not successful is how many people participate. Right? People need to be motivated enough to do something about it. If people weren't motivated to do stuff, no one cares. Right? What you really want is, I can't say that it was planned. Who knows how these things on the internet go, right? But what I can say is that now when people, particularly in the West, if you like, think, well, prior to Draw Mohammed Day, they looked back on these things and they say, well, the last time anyone did anything remotely like this, there were riots, death threats, people moving, and embassies being burnt down, that sort of thing. And that was only over a couple of dozen cartoons. Now, if you like, the thing that has been put out there onto the internet is that, well, this time there were thousands of people who did this, and all of a sudden, just by, if you like, the proverbial bitch slap, you've shown that, by this mass action, that you don't actually have to live in fear from these threats, that you diffuse these things by group action. And that I think is the key point.
I don't have a problem with that. In fact, that's part of the reason I took part in the "Have you seen this man" thing. The problem is the way you did it. I mean, as I've said repeatedly, I don't think you're a racist or a bigot or anything like that. But a lot of people who came into the Draw Mohammed Day movement were. And I'm just going by the comments I've seen left and the choice of videos that have been put out there.
In terms of the impact, I think you would do better by actually having a spectrum of people on board than actually by having a very narrow slice of essentially people with moderate and inoffensive opinions.
I think if you're...
if everything had been moderate and inoffensive, I don't think it would have garnered the
support of racists. I think you've got a problem. The other thing is the way you expressed it with the, with the paedophile Mohammed thing.
No.
I mean, that going back to the reciprocation point you made earlier on.
It all boils down to, does the means justify the ends? This is what it really is. The costs worth the benefits? Now, I agree. That if you actually have to get associated with people who you really wouldn't want to be associated with, and that's the cost of what you see giving this thing the best potential of impact. Are you willing to do it? Right. So there is a line there.
I mean, I'm trying not to put this into emotive terms, but is it fair to say that you were willing for racists to take part in the movement because you saw the aim as being so important?
They would have done anyway. What would it have been worth actually diffusing the momentum by trying? The simplicity of it all counts. Yeah. If you make it too complicated.
This is the thing. The way you went about it wasn't. You could have just drawn a stick figure or something like that. You went completely over the top.
No, I thought what I did was very tongue-in-cheek. I thought what I did was very tongue-in-cheek. I mean, it's how could anyone possibly take that seriously? Yeah, with the things I did with drawing Muhammad anyway. I mean, that little whatever beatard thing.
And I would give the answer that you gave me earlier on about the Cordova initiative. I think you should have seen it coming.
I did see it coming. It was a cost-benefit analysis, and I knew that loads of people would see me as a jerk for doing it. No, not the actual the video that I put up, but I mean, if you're going to go for big tent stuff, and if you basically decided that to give it the best chance of impact, you need the biggest tent possible. If you've decided that that's the way to go, would you actually compromise what you see as the chances of success by sort of complicating the message and sort of trying to clean up the whole movement?
Well, I mean, all I'm going to say is I personally wouldn't have done that. I would not have expressed myself in that way, and I would have made it clear that this wasn't an anti-Muslim thing, which is kind of how it came across.
Well, to be fair, it is. It's okay. It's probably offensive. Do you know what fraction of Muslims actually find this sort of thing offensive? Drawing Muhammad.
Well, I mean, it's prohibited in Sunni Islam. So, what's the fraction of Sunni Muslims? 80 something.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So I mean, in that sense, yeah, it is offensive to Islam. I mean, I wouldn't, nitpick too much about 20%, but.
Well, I just think there are other ways of doing it, and you said the softly approach wasn't working. When actually, there is actually evidence out there that it's starting to have an effect, but that you as the sort of scientist and whatever have gone Muslims no, Islam no, and that is actually problematic. I mean, one of the real issues
yeah, please.
Okay, go on.
No, the objective was very simple: to make the event as big an event as possible, to actually, try and generate some sort of media, whatever viral potential for it. It's not quite as simple as all other considerations secondary, but it was. Essentially there, there are all sorts of things that could have really screwed it up. YouTube could have pulled the plug on me. The videos could have got banned. There were all sorts of risks that had to be done. But basically, the strategy that was decided on is you need to make it as big as possible for the simple reason to replace the last time that someone did anything like this. There were embassies being burnt down, all that sort of shit. You need to make you need to make the biggest splash possible, such that the ripples from that sort of permeate. That the next time anyone plugs into the internet from the Islamic world, they will realise that Everyone else doesn't actually have to abide by your religious rules, and if you try to enforce them, or by sort of throwing protests and whatever, that you will get these sort of viral responses.
I think that is a somewhat simplistic analysis of the situation. With the Posten cartoons, you might recall that there weren't any problems for some months after they were published.
Yeah.
I mean, I've a slight, well, I don't really have it anymore. I actually wanted to publish those cartoons in a magazine I was editing in my student union, and I was stopped from publishing them.
Exactly. Those are the chilling effects that you're trying to reverse.
Yeah.
And if you like,
hang on, Thunderf00t. The thing is, originally it wasn't a problem. It became a problem when a group of, I think it was Egyptian clerics, started turning it into something.
Kind of like Cordoba, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's kind of like Cordoba, isn't it?
Well, yeah, except that Cordoba House said all right and changed their name.
Okay, Plan 51, whatever, I mean.
Yeah. So, there's, again, the two narratives I was talking about. And I would not have been happy organising a movement which racists could so readily come to. I'll put it no more strongly than that. The other thing, if I may say...
But you would, that is, you would have jeopardised the potential impact for trying to keep it cleaner. In other words,
yes.
That's the balance. That's the cost benefits analysis. You keep it cleaner, you diminish the impact. If you want to maximise it, you're going to have to jeopardise the cleanliness thing.
But this is the thing. I think because in order to make it that big, the people who fed into it actually screwed up the message and made it toxic. And so it wasn't, from the point of view of, people who have access to the internet in Pakistan or whatever, it wasn't about, we are not going to accept your religious mandates. It was, we don't like Muslims and we want to insult the Prophet Muhammad.
But in terms of fallout, you said that you wanted to publish some of these photos some time ago, and they said, no, we're not. We don't want you to do that. We think that'd be controversial. Looked at now, I mean, if these people had seen the Draw Muhammad Day and the lack of response to it, do you think that's actually somewhat restored? In other words, irrespective of if you actually approve of the methods, is it a step in the right direction in that it is reversed to a degree the chilling effects?
That is a positive. What is the negative? What is the counter to that? What is the result? This is one of the other problems I had with your video, is that do you remember you did a video declaring victory? You said it's a victory. It was a success, I think you said.
That's basically reiterating the points that I've just made. Yes?
Okay, I don't know if you watch my videos or not. I'm guessing not. But I made a video that basically said, yeah, you might be right. That might actually be a turning point, or the turning point, when things started making a real change, and we things started shifting and so on, and you might go down as a great humanitarian. Entirely possible.
The goal wasn't to make. The goal wasn't for me. The goal was to actually make the event a success.
Yeah, I know, but the point I'm making is it's too soon to tell. You don't know what the downstream externalities are. You said that it's been the fact that it had been taken down. Facebook. No, not was it Facebook or YouTube was blocked for a bit in Pakistan. There'd been a reaction. People had noticed. Meant it was a success. The thing is, you don't know how it's going to be used downstream. You don't know how this is being used as up a hillside in Afghanistan. You don't know how people are going to use this in the future. What I'm saying is, you don't have, I feel, the evidential base to declare it.
No, but in terms of
to declare it a success.
But in terms of reversing the chilling effects in the West, it's very difficult to contrive that this is a negative effect.
But if the result of that is a greater problem elsewhere.
But this, to a degree, you know, going back to what I was saying earlier, that basically what you want to do is protect the freedom of speech, because these are the things that drive the growth of knowledge, that builds the civilizations, that makes all our lives better. Going back, you know, to the other point, that the Middle East really doesn't actually contribute anything there. And so, you know, if you like, defending freedom of speech in the West is probably, what am I saying probably? By my assessment, defending freedom of speech in the West is a higher priority than exporting it to the Islamic world.
Sorry, I want to make sure I've got that. Defending free speech in the West.
Correct? Is a higher priority than exporting it to the Middle East or wherever. You know the area we're talking about, the black area on the map.
I'll have to think about that. I regard them as being rather linked. Now, are you sorry. Sorry, I've got a bazillion people messaging me on Skype, a couple of whom are work people who I've got to listen to. You said, going back to something we were on, which sort of brought us on to this, this is going back to Saudi Arabia. You do know that Saudi is a Wahhabist state.
Yeah.
You know, there's only one other.
I mean, well,
there's only one other state that is Wahhabist. Qatar.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
or at least they go for the same.
Are they the richest country in the world per capita?
No, that's Liechtenstein.
Okay.
Actually, no, sorry, no, they have the same school of jurisprudence. They're both Hanbali. Sorry. Anyway, there are connections there. The issue, as I said, okay, I don't think anybody would disagree that there is, quote unquote, a problem with Islam. The question is the nature of the problem. Now, you've got, and this is actually what I was looking for earlier on. There's a book called The Refutation of Wahhabism by Hamadi Radisi. There's other groups that have come out against the House of Saud, including the Islamic Supreme Council of America, and so on. Various people have criticised them for iconoclasm. The issue here is that you've got this, for various reasons about what's happened in Saudi Arabia, you've got Wahhabism being spread around the world, one way and another. What's sometimes called petro-Islam. You had the House of Saud established Saudi Arabia. They were Wahhabists to begin with. Then they found oil, and then suddenly oil became very important, and they were able to export that. And there's all sorts of domestic stuff going on as well. That is, from my point of view, what we need to be looking at, because where we've got problems emerging up a hillside in Afghanistan and Pakistan, you can trace the money and the ideology back to Wahhabism. I sometimes like to call it takfirism, because it's not just Wahhabists.
Landon, isn't this mostly fallout of the Afghan war?
Sorry?
I mean, on this one I would agree with you. This is a multi-factor problem that is path dependent, and that basically this all goes down to the fallout of the Afghan war, and it's sort of blowback from the Afghan war. I would, if you like, for this one, I would say that Islam is actually a relatively minor element.
It's right. Well, it's right. That's part of it. It's more than that, because you see the same thing with them, funding madrasas and so on in various places. That's the Islam we need to challenge and say, this is problematic. Good. We need to stop that.
Good. So now we're actually now we're onto exporting ideas into Islamic countries. Yeah.
Who is better placed, do you think? Who is going to be, if you're, that's one narrative, who is better placed to get to the guy in the middle?
Who is the guy in the
you know,
middle?
You know, just an average man on the street, on the Arab street, as the saying goes.
Okay.
You know, it's an everyman. Who do you think gets them? Who do you think they are likely to feel has their interests or feel has an accurate Weltschauung worldview? Is it going to be someone like that who's also doing social things? Is it going to be a moderate person, say like Raouf, or is it going to be you?
You're basically asking. There is a plasticity to the opinions of Islam over time, and you are asking which is the prime factor. People like me, who have maybe a negative opinion, a negative opinion of the religion. People
No,
who are.
It's not that. It's who is most likely to move things within Islam in the direction we want it to move? Who is more likely to affect that plasticity?
Yeah. So I mean, basically, what you're talking about is, this is Islam as currently is practiced. You want it. Yeah. What is more likely to shift it to the moderate side of things? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see the primary problem that is the almost monochromatic nature of the religion within these countries. That makes it very difficult. When you have countries like in Europe, there is this big mixing, which means that it's much easier for ideas to penetrate the society and for the society to change. And with Islam, it's very monochromatic, which gives you less plasticity than the European societies. That's how I would say it. So in that sense, I would be very reluctant to actually field an opinion on that, simply because I'm not sure. I see these as fairly rigid societies that are very difficult that find it very difficult to accept change. And
I'm not debating that. They are not fixed. They do change over time.
Sure. But they have less capacity to change over time than.
But I don't see how. The fact that firstly I contest that, and I'm going to bring up the stuff before. This isn't all about Islam. There are other factors at work. But given that there is some plasticity, which who is going to be best able to move it in the direction we want?
Well, I mean, I guess the bottom line there is that if you have a country that is, for want of a better word, 100% Islamic, I don't think that a non-Islamic voice will carry much weight. So in other words, it's de facto. You have to have an Islamic voice speaking in a country that is, for want of a better word, monochromatically Islamic.
Okay. Now, when you say the religion is monochromatic within these countries, I mean, can I just want to pin down a bit what you mean. You mean that everyone's practicing it in the same way, or that it's imposed so everybody has to practice it in the same way?
No. I mean, that's they are. If the population who consider themselves Islamic is 90% plus, and that means that there's only 10% that's non-Islamic. Someone said no sound. There's only 10% that's non-Islamic, and the ability of the society to incorporate change is related to the size of the non-Islamic community. That's, if you like, where the ideas can flow from. If you have a very Islam-heavy country, it's very difficult to incorporate ideas that buck that culture.
But it is happening, isn't it?
Yeah. But
Okay.
I mean, for me, the interesting one is, you compare how quickly, right? Because going back to the, you can cheat with knowledge. This is the great thing about it. So we've got the pump, which is science generating the knowledge which builds the civilizations, right? But the thing is, to actually generate knowledge costs an absolute fortune. So if you like, the cost of this is whatever 10% of the population working for 300 years or something, but it's cumulative, right? Now the thing is that if you're another country, a developing country, you can essentially copy all of that knowledge for essentially free. And this is essentially what China and India have done. And once you copy that knowledge, you can actually build your civilization very quickly. Now the thing is that the Islamic world seems to, and Africa as well, these are the two places that seem very slow to essentially do the bloody obvious and copy that data and build their civilization accordingly. Now it has to be said, these are long-term projects. The bare minimum that it requires to do this is you need an educated generation, which is like 20 years or something. And if you were to ask me what do I think is the best way to change attitudes in Afghanistan, it's got to be in the schools. I mean, just so we're on the sort of same page on Afghanistan, there is an entire generation that's known nothing but war there. That is their way of life. And so you can keep on killing people in perpetuity in such an environment and not make any progress. You see, by my reckoning, you without getting into the schools and actually educating a generation whose purpose isn't to fight, then you can make some progress, right? But governments don't work on 15 and 20-year plans. They work. They want to sort of kill these guys today and go home.
This is the thing, Thunderf00t. We've got to, we have to have relations with Muslims, with the Islamic world.
Yes.
That's the reality we have. What you've been doing in your videos has been to, I think, portray a simplistic view of the Islamic world and to give the impression that everything that is wrong in those countries is the fault of Islam.
And I would bring
it's the impression I picked up, and I think a few other people have picked up as well.
Mm.
And I think that actually has the potential to make the situation worse. You see, what we've got here, and this goes back to something I was saying at the beginning, is counterinsurgency.
Counterinsurgency is actually a secondary issue as far as I would be concerned. The flow of ideas, that's probably number one. Counterinsurgency, because defending this, right? Losing a load of people is not actually a big deal. You can wipe out countries, you can wipe out civilizations, but you wipe out the knowledge is what carries it, right? So the counterinsurgency is operationally insignificant.
I rather disagree, actually. But I mean, as I said, I don't think that Islam poses any significant threat to the West. It doesn't pose an existential threat.
No.
Can it affect the West's interests? Sure, yeah. I mean, clearly. But does it pose an existential threat in the way that the Soviet Union did? I don't see it.
In that sense, yeah, but that's an operational threat, not an incremental threat. If you like, with Islam, the one that I find maybe most pertinent was the first time that he drew these. This guy drew these pictures of Muhammad, and there was this huge backlash, and that did have chilling effects. That had legitimate chilling effects. That you got papers who were, actually legitimately worried about the fallout they would have if they actually did this sort of thing. You have experienced it firsthand yourself. Right? That is, if you like, the export of ideas, and those are the chilling effects that you've really got to counter. Because if you don't counter them, then you are on an incremental path, right? Unless, right, when there is an equilibrium of social pressures, you have stasis, right? But if there is greater pressure coming, if there is no counter pressure, and you just accept that, oh no, we mustn't draw things that are offensive to Islam, then you are importing the ideas, right?
Okay,
That it is having an effect on the behaviour of your country.
Okay, now where the threats in the West, say, the chilling effect, is generally from, British case, in British Muslims or whatever. You don't generally get people travelling to cause problems of that nature.
Mm.
And this is why I go back to the coin point, the counterinsurgency point, because it's how do you make it harder for the extremists within your country to try and make something out of, say, drawing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah, it's how how do you weaken them so that they don't have the support to actually make something of what they're trying to do. And in that, actually, I'm going to go back to quoting, as I like to do. This is David Kilcullen, who is, well, at the moment, the sort of leading expert and leading practitioner on counterinsurgency. Perception is crucial in developing control and influence over population groups. Yeah, that's the first thing. What we're dealing with here is we've got to, if we want to stop that chilling effect, stop people feeling actually afraid for their lives, we've got to get to people in our own country, and to do that, we have to be able to, we can't be so out there that they won't even hear us. And the stuff you do, Thunderfoot, just makes it look like there is an unbreachable, an unclosable breach between Islam and the West. And I think that actually does
if you're going to build white tent support, that's the path you have to walk. If you've chosen that is the strategy with it's like invading Iraq. You're going to get your guys killed, right? But is it worth it for what you're going to get out of it?
Do you think that there is do you think that there is a breach that can't be closed between Islam and the West?
No, because they're populations. This is essentially what we've been discussing all along. There are elements that will be more and this is what gets me, is that Christianity and Islam are somewhat interchangeable over most of their history. And they mostly look like Islam does at the moment. Right? You take a look at most of the history of Christianity in Europe, and it looks pretty much like the history of Islam. I don't see there's a great deal. And if you like, you take a look at Islam, there was enough in there for an Islamic golden age. And in the same way that I would say that people don't have an objection to calling it an Islamic golden age and attributing it to the religion, I would also have no problem in attributing the dark age that comes afterwards to Islam. Right? But, so both religions, if you like, have capacity to be congenial to the growth of knowledge. But Islam, as it is at the moment, is obviously nowhere as congenial to that as is the current attitude in Europe.
Okay, let me see how I see it. I take a lot of what you say, but there's change happening within the Islamic world. People talk from time to time about Islamic Reformation. You're never going to get it in exactly the same way for historical reasons, obviously in a different situation, but also there is no equivalent of the papacy in Islam.
Yeah.